morning, everyone. We're going to bring the board meeting to order. First order of business is roll call.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Priya Mathur.
I'm here.
Rob Fechner.
Good morning.
Margaret Brown.
Excused.
Matthew Saha for John Chung. Here. Richard Costigan. Here. Dana Hollinger. Here. Adria Jenkins-Jones. Here. Henry Jones. Here. David Miller. Here. Ramon Rubicava. Here. Bill Slayton. Here. Teresa Taylor. Here. And Lynn Paquin for Betty Yee.
We have a quorum. Next order of business is approval of the November 15th, 2018 Board of Administration timed agenda.
Move approval. Second.
Motion made by Ms. Taylor, seconded by Ms. Hollinger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. The next order of business is the Pledge of Allegiance, and I believe we have, I'm so sorry, sir, I don't have your name in front of me. Forgive, Mr. Richards? Bridges, I'm sorry, forgive me, thank you. Mr. Bridges is a vet and is going to lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much, Mr. Bridges. And then we are very fortunate to have the choir here with us today who are going to sing a few songs in honor of our veterans. Let's have the board come down to the audience. So we are so honored to have Mr. Bridges and our choir, our chorus, share with us their time this morning. On Monday, our nation celebrated a very sacred day, Veterans Day, which is more than just a holiday. It's a time that Americans can honor all those who have served or are currently serving in our armed forces, and those who currently serve in reserve status. Today, we continue the celebration to honor the veterans who are part of our CalPERS family and extended family of members, employers, and stakeholders. Christopher Bridges, who so kindly led the pledge this morning, works in our Customer Service and Outreach Division. He joined the U.S. Army 6 months after 9/11 and served for 5 years. He was an M1A1 Abrams tank crewman stationed at Ray Barracks in Friedberg, Germany, coincidentally the same base as Elvis Presley. Maybe he has the same musical talent. And was assigned to the 1st Battalion, 37th Armored Regiment. In 2006, he was deployed to the Al Anbar region of Iraq and saw combat in Ramadi and the surrounding areas. At the end of Christopher's service, he was a Sergeant E5 assigned as a tank gunner in the 1st Armored Division. And we were, again, very honored to have you lead us in the pledge this morning. Thanks so much for being with us. I would also like to acknowledge the veterans who work here in our headquarters building and those in our regional offices across the state. And to all the veterans in our audience today, members, employers, and stakeholders, I invite you all to please stand. We are so honored that you are all here with us today and grateful for your dedication, sacrifice, and courage. On behalf of the board and all of us here at CalPERS, we thank you for your service to our country. Now, I would like to take a brief moment of silence. As we all know, fires are raging all across the state of California, and too many have tragically lost their lives. We also recently suffered a terrible event in Thousand Oaks, California, where a deputy sheriff lost his life and others were injured. And so I would like us to take a brief moment of silence in support of our first responders who put their lives on the line for us every day, and also for all of those who have lost their lives in the fires. Thank you. At this moment, I want to do something that's very hard to do. It's always hard to say goodbye to a colleague and friend, but it is especially hard to say goodbye to Ted Eliopoulos. Ted has been part of the CalPERS family for the past 17 years, and I have had the pleasure of serving with him and knowing him for 16 of those 17. First, he was a representative on this board for Treasurer Angelides. Then he was the Senior Investment Officer for Real Assets. And for the last 4 years, and actually a little bit more, he was our Chief Investment Officer. During his tenure, Ted has worked diligently to rebuild our portfolio following the Great Recession, to restructure our real estate assets, and implement a new vision to strengthen CalPERS investments for the future. Ted provided clear leadership and vision to guide the investment team to reduce the complexity of the portfolio, including making the challenging decision to end programs that were no longer meeting our investment goals. This in turn led to millions of dollars saved by CalPERS through a reduction in fees paid to external managers. Ted has always recognized the importance of diversity and the need to expand our workforce with the best new talent in the investment industry. He's also kept a watchful eye on reducing the fund's exposure to risk across the portfolio from environmental, social, and governance factors. And I know Ted has his wife Kelly with him in the audience today. Hi, Kelly. Ted, will you please join me on stage? On behalf of the CalPERS family, I really want to express our deep appreciation for all that you have given to CalPERS, both as a member of this team, which really is a family, and to our members who so need the resources that you help provide over the years. So thanks so much, Ted. And I'll maybe give this to you so that.
It's an emotional moment, so I wrote out a few notes. Priya, thank you so much. I'm trying to not turn my back to you here. I'll come over here. Thank you so much for those words, for the friendship and leadership over the last 16 years together. These past 17 years have been really an intersection of the majority of my professional life and career, and really deep and profound belief in the mission and people of CalPERS. It is an emotional moment, but the emotion I feel most is gratitude. I am so grateful to CalPERS and this institution, and to the many people, past and present, who have contributed so much to CalPERS and to my and my family's life. I look back, and I was 38 years old and father of two young daughters when I started this journey at the Treasurer's office and representing the Treasurer here at CalPERS. And I'm so grateful for that opportunity, for my colleagues there, to Treasurer Angelides, who was such a wonderful mentor and intellect in thinking about the intersection of public policy and investments. I feel lucky and grateful to all the treasurers and controllers and treasurers representatives and controllers representatives and governors representatives and legislative representatives and all the public officials and their staffs that I've had the great opportunity to interact with and learn from over the years. I am grateful to my real estate and real assets team. We took that portfolio through the great financial crisis. It was I think the hardest and toughest professional challenge I've ever gone through, and we made it through. And as Paul Muchaka, reported to this board last month, we've reconstituted and reconstructed that real estate portfolio to one of the great bedrock quality core portfolios in the institutional world. Few more remarks here, so bear with me. It was a long career. I am so grateful to Joe Deere and Ann Stausball, who asked me to help out as acting CIO together with Mr. Fechner. It was a very difficult time when Joe asked me to do that. Each in their own way, Joe and Ann were mentors to me and helped me so much as I look back, to grow into the position that we're in today. I heard I wanted to make sure there wasn't an alarm. Safety first. Safety first. But they were teaching me and really helping me grow as a human being. Joe really stepped in at a critical time for CalPERS to help rebuild the investment office. He and Janine Gilliatt and the whole investment team were really a wonder in rebuilding the operating environment and framework for CalPERS. We are so lucky to have had a succession of investment leaders who really think similarly about risk management and operational integrity. I can see a straight line, really, of that type of thinking from Joe and Janine to myself and Wiley Tollett to Ben Ming and Elizabeth now. Elizabeth's the newcomer, but we're taking her in under our wing and learning from her exceptional experience and helping us move this investment office forward. I am grateful to all of them and have learned so much from them, and I really am deeply, profoundly grateful and happy for CalPERS that we've had this continuity into the future. I am very grateful for Eric Baggeson to step into this acting CIO role. I know what it's like to be an acting CIO, but more importantly, Eric has been a central leader in our investment office over the same period of time that I've been here, and his incredible intellect and experience and way of bringing together the very best of the ideas in our investment office is really a marvel. And he really is an example of the type of people we have in this investment office. They come here with incredible experiences across the globe from many different areas of expertise, and they bring their best ideas, their best talent, and an overwhelming sense of mission to benefit CalPERS. CalPERS is so lucky to have all these investment leaders over the years. You know them all by their first names: Curtis and Dan and Kevin and Arnie and Rial and Beth and Ann Simpson and the whole team that have been able to produce the results that we've been able to achieve. I want to thank Teresa Chavarria. She's been an assistant and mentor to all of those CIOs that have been here since Mark Anson, and she's been an incredible partner and helper, not just for me, but the entire investment office. We rely on you so much, and it's also emblematic of the great administrative help that we have. Board Services Unit, the administrative unit within the investment office. You know, my mom, her career was as an office technician in a local community college, so I know, one, how important those jobs are and how important the opportunity is to grow within the administrative ranks, and we have that ability here, and we have such great talent in the administrative offices within CalPERS, and we see so much talent grow into so many spots of leadership within the office, and we thank Teresa and all of the administrative help that we've had over the years. I want to thank our executive team. We get together 8:30 every morning to talk about how we can make things better for CalPERS, and you know, not only the people that you see in this front row, but the roles that they play: our legal office, our administrative office, our benefits, our compliance, our actuarial, our communication help, our finance office, our health benefits. It's an exceptional leadership team of people of incredible integrity that all work together, and no matter how cranky a morning it is, at 8:30 get together to do the best for CalPERS. It's their sole focus. I want to thank Marcy Frost. I know you don't like the attention. As you crinkle your nose as you leave the mention, but she's a tremendous leader. And I think I know how lucky we are at CalPERS to have her at this moment and this time. She's as good and strong and executive as I've seen in state service, and we're very fortunate to have her here, and I know CalPERS is in good hands. Madam President, members of the board, I thank you, each and every one of you here sitting today, and those that sat in these seats before you, for the honor to serve and the opportunity to work with each and every one of you. You've kept me on my toes, these monthly meetings. The questions and the dialogue are so beneficial to CalPERS, and the fact that we do it in this public setting and open setting is really remarkable, what we've been able to achieve and help each other with over the last 2 decades for myself. As you can tell, I'm very, very proud of what we collectively do here, the mission that we have, the type of people and the character of the people that we have at CalPERS. You know, I've had the honor of doing a lot of orientations for our new employees here, and I tell them the same story, and I'll end with that story, which is we get faced with lots of difficult choices within CalPERS. We have awesome responsibilities and accountability for what we do. And sometimes it can seem somewhat abstract to think of $350 billion and all the complex parts of our portfolio or within our policy arenas. And sometimes it can feel a bit abstract to think of the 1.8 million people that depend on us. And what I do whenever there's a particularly difficult decision is try and personalize those 1.8 million. So I always think of my mom and dad who depended on CalSTRS for their pension. And I kind of think through and see them at the kitchen table when they're in their 50s and 60s and 70s and 80s. And our pensioners rely on us to provide the pensions that have been promised to us. And as they age, they get less and less able to fend for themselves and more dependent on the work that we do to provide their retirement security for them. And it's the greatest honor and public service that I can think of to have played a small role. So thank you.
We are now going to take a break to celebrate our esteemed friend, Ted Eliopoulos. We have some refreshments outside. Going to restart the board meeting. Thanks to all who helped celebrate Ted. So the next order of business is the Chief Executive Officer's report. Ms. Frost.
Thank you. And good morning, President Mather and members of the board. I'd also like to take just a moment to express my and the executive team and the team here at CalPERS our appreciation for Ted and his many years of service to not only CalPERS, but to the state of California. During his tenure, our members have certainly benefited from Ted's careful stewardship of the money entrusted to his team to fund the retirement benefits that our members and our beneficiaries rely on. And his willingness to embrace new ideas and some very creative ideas in private equity, our asset liability management process, which we and this board go through every 4 years, and the fee transparency and the implementation of the CalPERS system. These approaches have placed CalPERS in a stronger position for our members and our beneficiaries. On a personal note, as Ms. Mather indicated, it's always very difficult to say goodbye to a friend and a colleague and someone who you really enjoy working with every day. He indicated our 8:30 huddles, and Ted is the one who comes in bright and chipper because he's usually done his yoga for the day, and it just gets us off to a good start that we're starting as a team looking at the issues or the items that we need to face together on any given day. Ted willingly shares his wisdom and his approach of working for the years that he has here in the state of California, and I certainly have benefited and appreciated his wisdom and advice in my first 2 years here. So Ted, on behalf of CalPERS, and I know we've said this already, we wish you and your family all the best in your East Coast adventure. Now, I'd like to recap our annual educational forum that took place just a few weeks ago in Indian Wells, and I know several of you had an opportunity to attend that event as well. We had a record attendance at over 900 employers, making this our largest event to date. The educational session rooms were filled to capacity. Appointments with our teams, those one-on-one appointments that our employers really seem to enjoy, those consultations were completely booked as well. And visits to the exhibit hall were very popular. Over the course of the 3-day forum, we held a general session each day, which gave us the opportunity to talk to all of the attendees at once about the decisions that we're making here at CalPERS to strengthen the fund. As well as helping them to understand some of our investment strategies moving into the future. One of the highlights of the forum each year is a Spotlight on Excellence award ceremony, which honors an outstanding public servant or program. This is a peer-nominated award that gives employers a chance to nominate a colleague or agency for recognition. This year's award went to Manuel Colunga. He is a field operations supervisor with the San Bernardino Valley Water Conservation District. His work has made a significant impact on the region's water customers and also on his community. I'll let the video our team produced tell his story. If we could roll the video.
I get to watch the sunrise from my office in Mentone. I get to look at the ponds in Santa Ana River. We are on the top of the Seven Oaks Dam in Highland in San Bernardino County. This is one of my many beautiful offices that I have. My name is Manuel Colunga. I work for the San Bernardino Valley Water Conservation District. I am the outdoor field supervisor. We're headed towards a Redlands Aqueduct sandbox, and then we'll go out and measure pretty much all the native water, basically Mill Creek and Santa Ana. I serve the community by making sure all of this water that we're given reaches them. I make sure that it recharges the aquifer as it's supposed to, that the majority of it goes into the aquifer as it's supposed to, and that everything is always in working order so that we can always do that. If we didn't do what we did, the majority of water would flush down to the ocean, and very little would benefit this area. City of Redlands, Yucaipa, Loma Linda, Colton, Rialto, Riverside, San Bernardino, Highland, the growers between here and there.
If someone needs to know what's going on with the complicated plumbing out there that moves water around, they call Manuel. He'll know exactly what's going on, and if he doesn't, he'll go find out and report back to them.
Is this too much?
Most people don't really know where their water comes from. They don't think about it very much, and they don't have to. That's really the value of what we bring.
So what I'm going to be doing is moving water around. I'm going to close the gate here at 10 and open the gate at 13.
We're blessed with a 5 million acre-foot storage capacity in this basin. Currently, we're about 600,000 acre-feet in overdraft. I believe because of what we're able to do and our mission, what we have been doing, has been our supply seeing us through this drought that we've been through. And Manny's a big part of that. Manny is amazing.
Hey, dude. What'd you find?
Found some stinkwort down in here, about 80 yards down.
All right, you got the bag? We're constantly on the lookout for invasive species that can and do take over our property sometimes.
Here we go. Got some stinkwort here. Getting ready to seed.
The stinkwort bloomed a lot this year. We were on it from the get-go. We got it before it flowered and went to seed. I would say it's about 90% gone from when we found it.
Pull it out. Don't spray it. Manny, it's the most awesomest boss I've ever had in my life. And yeah, I do look up to him a lot.
In addition to placing all of that water underground, he protects 5 different endangered species.
This looks like the kind of area a kangaroo rat would live. It wants some wide open places to run. There's kangaroo rats, is one of the endangered species. There's lots of people that come out here to study them. I saw what I thought was a den. And so we had just purchased these surveillance cameras, and I put one down in front of it. There was a kangaroo rat on it. Pretty cool.
The people, in my opinion, that are good public servants, they do it because of the love for what they do and their love for serving. And that's where Manny is. His whole life, in my opinion, is based on love. Either love for that 5,000 acres out there or love for the kids.
Manuel's been involved with the youth circus, like many people in Redlands, for generations. He started when his kids were young, and the central point is just a love of people, which is what makes service important to him.
Put your hands on the shoulder blades and lift. Ian and Emmy started in 2001 was their first show year. Emmy was 4, Ian was 6. I was minding my own business, just letting them be. And one day, they came over and tapped me on the shoulder and said, could I help? That's how I got involved. The youth circus started in 1928. It was started by my wife's grandfather, Roy Coble, and he used to work for Barnum and Bailey Circus. And he came over here, worked for the Y. Ready? It's an amazing thing. The circus is like a gym. I'm constantly lifting people up and over me or hanging down below me and they're doing tricks. We're pretty good. Just like here, we're pretty good. And yes, it is a public service. And what we do, we use it to benefit everybody out here. But it's beautiful here. And I get to do it, thank goodness.
As you can see, Manny is clearly passionate about serving his community, and it was a privilege to have him in attendance and to get to meet him in person. We'll also have the chance next year to feature another public servant or agency and to engage with our employer community at next year's 20th Annual Education Forum. Mark your calendars now. It'll be held October 28th through the 30th at the Oakland Marriott City Center in the San Francisco Bay Area. Moving on now to investment committee business. On Monday, you received a performance review of the public and private equity investment programs. Both had strong fiscal year performance that even in these volatile markets, we're working to build upon. You also had a chance on Monday to continue the discussion we've been having around the private equity models. These are discussions that will continue into next month as well. And we've also been holding meetings with our stakeholders to explain the concepts to them and, most importantly, to answer their questions. One of the more important publications we produce each year is the Comprehensive Annual Financial Report, or the CAFR. The CAFR provides us with a detailed summary of our financial standing and contains a host of data we use in our decision making, and we also share that with our stakeholders. Central to the report are the financial statements approved in yesterday's Finance and Administration Committee, and that come before the full board today for final approval. The CAFR is in the process of being finalized now, and we expect to release it next month. On to a bit of outreach activity, switching gears again to outreach and stakeholders. Last week I spoke to about 200 fund managers and institutional investors at the West Investors annual meeting in San Francisco. Karen Green-Ross from the State Controller's Office was in attendance and was hosting a panel as well. The event is really designed to bring together industry thought leaders and institutional investors located in the Western states. And I did have an opportunity to talk with them a bit about our efforts to strengthen the fund and our investment strategies for the future. I would say that most of the interest centered around our emerging manager and our transition manager programs, however. Tomorrow, I'll be participating on a panel about long-term value creation at the Inclusive Capitalism Conference in Washington, D.C. At the heart of the discussion is a call for public companies to adopt a framework that's been created by a group of investors, asset managers, and others from the investment industry on how do we measure and communicate shareholder value beyond quarterly financial returns. So how do we have a framework that measures human capital implications or culture of organizations? And do we see that there's an alignment of interest between the investor community and the corporate community to understand that these companies are going to continue to grow? And also, I would say that grow in relationship to the liabilities that we have at CalPERS. So I look forward to coming back and sharing with you that event at a future meeting. At the end of this month, on November 30th, I'll have the opportunity to interact with attendees at the California School Boards Association's annual education conference, and that will be the first time that I've attended that event. These are board members from school programs throughout the state, and I'll be on a panel and really introducing them again to the messages around the fund and the pension sustainability work that we've been doing here in California. Turning now to our annual fall fundraising activities. I know some of our employees brought some turkeys out to the turkey drop today, and you may have seen our employees out there wearing masks also due to air quality issues that are going on here. A couple of weeks ago, we completed our events for the Our Promise campaign. We brought the chili cook-off back. That was really important to our team here. We had made a change last year that the cook-off didn't happen, but we brought that very popular event back, and I think the team was very appreciative of that. We also did our silent auction during the lunchtime break. In addition to our fundraising efforts, all state workers were provided with the opportunity to select a charity for payroll deduction, which is one of the primary aims of the campaign statewide. I'd like to thank Wayne Davis and Rob Jerzombek for leading this year's efforts and being co-chairs of the events. They had a big team of volunteers, of course, working with them to host the events, which are always very well received by the employees here at CalPERS. It's part of what makes working here so special. As we near the holidays, we're also participating in the State Employees Food Drive, which will last into January of 2019. Employees will be able to make food and monetary donations throughout the fundraising period. And these contributions will go to support local food banks and also provide support services to help individuals and families who are experiencing difficult times. This year's donation goal that the team has set is to collect 60,000 pounds of food. And now I will close with investment performance year-to-date as of August 31st. The preliminary one-year rolling return is 8.1. The 3-year return is 8.7. The 5-year return is 8.1. The 10-year return is 6. And finally, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving for next week and safe travels, whether that's here locally within the Sacramento area or other places that you may be traveling to. Like all state agencies in California, CalPERS headquarters and all of our regional offices will be closed on Thursday, November 22nd and Friday, November 23rd in observance of the holiday. And that does conclude my remarks, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you very much, Ms. Frost. I don't see any requests to speak, so with that, we will move on to agenda item number 6, which is the action consent items. What's the pleasure of the board?
Move approval.
Moved by Mr. Fechner, seconded by Ms. Hollinger. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. Agenda item number 7 is the information consent items, and I've had no request to pull anything off of consent. So that brings us to agenda item number 8, committee reports and actions. First, I'll call on the chair of the investment committee, Mr. Jones.
Thank you, Madam President.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam President. The investment committee met on November 13, 2018. The committee approved agenda item 6A, adopt the revised total fund policy and real assets program policy. The committee received reports on the global equity and private equity annual program reviews and consultants' reports. The chair directed staff to bring back information about PERS system assessment. The committee heard public comments on the following topics: CalPERS' existing private equity program and the proposed private equity model. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the December Investment Committee meeting. Fee disclosure, AB 2833, Annual Responsible Contractor Policy Program. Report to the legislature, California Public Divest from Iran Act and Sudan Act compliance. Consultant review of CalPERS divestments and the emerging and transition manager update. The next meeting of the investment committee is scheduled for December 17, 2018 in Sacramento, California. And that concludes my report, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jones. That brings us to 8B, Pension and Health Benefits Committee, and for that, I'll call on the chair, Rob Fechner.
Thank you, Madam President. The Pension Health Benefits Committee, PHBC, met on November 14, 2018. The committee recommends and I move the board approve the following. Agenda item 6A, approve the revised proposed regulations for a 15-day comment period and recommend approval to submit the final rulemaking package to the Office of Administrative Law upon conclusion of the comment period, so long as no public comments are received.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any noes? Motion passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics. The committee received an update on the evaluation of health regions for public agencies and schools and the strategy for a prescription drug reference pricing program. The committee directed staff to research improving flexibility to access of care by looking into site of care as an addition to the live and work policy. For the December PHBC evaluation of health regions for public agencies and schools, remove scenario E as an option and provide a chart with regions showing the percentage of cost impact and the percentage of members affected. Collaborate with employers on strategies for dealing with variations in cost of care by region. Proceed with a request for information and request for proposal regarding the reference pricing by therapeutic drug program. The committee heard public comment on the following topics: CalPERS response to the Butte County fires, regional rating, and health benefits program annual report. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the December Pension and Health Benefits Committee meeting. The committee will review the regions and regional factors for public agencies and schools. The next meeting of the Pension and Health Benefits Committee is scheduled for December 18, 2018 in Sacramento, California. That ends my report, Madam President.
Thank you very much, Mr. Fechner. That brings us to agenda item number 8C, Finance and Administration Committee report. For that, I'll call on the chair, Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Madam President. The Finance and Administration Committee met on November 14th, 2018. The committee recommends, and I move the board approve the following: Agenda Item 6A, approve the draft 2017-18 basic financial statements.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The committee recommends, and I move the board approve the following Agenda Item 6B, approve the fiscal year 2018-19 mid-year total budget of $1.7 billion and 2,875 positions, and the transmittal of this agenda item.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The committee recommends, and I move the board approve the following Agenda Item 7A, adopt the proposed modifications to the financial necessity amortization policy.
On motion by committee, any discussion by the motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics: the 2017-18 year-end budget and expenditure report, the annual review of funding levels and risk report, the semi-annual health plan and financial report. And I'd like to call up Kim Malm right now. The committee had some questions that she found the answers to that she was going to give us today.
Ms. Malm.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Board of Administration. Kim Malm, CalPERS team member. So yesterday there were 3 questions in regards to the board election, and I'd like to provide you with those answers. The first question was in regards to the spam filters, and we confirmed with Public Affairs that we are unable to determine any of the emails that go into the spam filter since that's a user setting. In regards to the undeliverable mail to our membership, CalPERS team members utilize the United States Postal Service software Veramove, and they do a comparison with the addresses that the Postal Service has on file with the addresses we have in My CalPERS twice a year. We then send letters to the new address that the post office has on file twice a year to our members. If they are, there's 2 separate letters, one for actives asking them to go and change their address with their employers. The second letter is for retirees asking them to either go into member self-service and change their address or to contact the call center, and we will change that for them. The third question revolved around the board election costs and what it costs for just mail versus online and phone. What we did was we utilized the current cycle. And so, of course, this changes per cycle because it depends on how many members are voting and whether or not we have elections. So we utilize the cycle that we started with the member at large, having a runoff for the member at large. The public agency election, we did not have state and school, so that's not included because there was no cost. And then estimated cost for retiree election. We haven't done that yet, so these are our estimates, but we feel that we're pretty close. The cost for online and phone voting is $2.67 million for all of the elections for online and phone. Member at large, runoff, the state, school, PA, and retired. The cost for mailed is $4.7 for all of those same elections, knowing that we didn't have 2 elections and we haven't done the last one yet. However, if we were to go back at some point, if the board decided to return to mail only, we would probably make different decisions than we do right now. We could talk about those, like such as right now we send a welcome letter, we send the candidate booklet, and we send a ballot. And what we could talk about is sending maybe just the one-page ballot that has instructions, and then they could, our members could possibly go online and read the candidate statements. And we could reduce the amount of paper and printing from it's about 20 pages right now for the mouse. It's about 10, 11 pages for the smaller elections. We could change that to like 1 page. And so although it won't change our postage, because we already have the lowest postage, it would change the amount of paper and printing costs that we spend. So that 4.7 number that I gave you could significantly reduce. So I just wanted to provide those answers that came up yesterday. Happy to answer any other questions if you have them.
Thank you. Any question from the board? Seeing none, thank you very much for that update. Ms. Taylor.
Thank you, Ms. Malm. The only other thing the chair directed staff to do was review of the end-to-end election process during the 2020 off-election year. At this time, I'd like to share some highlights of what to expect at the December Finance and Administration Committee meeting, reporting on participating employers. The next meeting of the Finance Administration Committee is scheduled for December 18th, 2018 in Sacramento, California. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. That we did not have a Performance Comp and Talent Management Committee, so it brings us to Agenda Item 8E, which is the Risk and Audit Committee, and for that I'll call on the chair, Ms. Hollinger.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Risk and Audit Committee met on November 14th, 2018. The committee recommends, and I move the board approve the following. Agenda Item 6A, Independent Auditors Report, Fiscal Years 2017 and 2018. Approve the CalPERS Board of Administration's Independent Financial Statement Auditors Draft Report and accompanying required reports for the fiscal year ended June 30th, 2018.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda Item 6B, Review of the Independent Auditor's Management Letter. Approve the CalPERS Board of Administration's Independent Financial Statement Auditor's Draft Management Letter for the fiscal year June 30th, 2018.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed? Motion passes.
Agenda Item 6C, Independent Financial Statement Auditor Selection. Approve the cancellation of RFP number 2018-8484 without awarding the Independent Financial Statement Auditing Services contract and reissue the RFP to seek additional vendor participation.
On motion by committee, any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
The committee received reports on the following topics: the Enterprise Risk Management Framework Review. At this time, I would like to share some highlights of what to expect at the February Risk and Audit Committee meeting. The election of the Risk and Audit Committee Chair and Vice Chair, and review of the Risk and Audit Committee delegation. The next meeting of the Risk and Audit Committee is scheduled for February 20th, 2018 in Sacramento, California.
Thank you very much, Ms. Hollinger. We also did not have a Governance Committee meeting, so that brings us to Agenda Item number 9, which is the action agenda items on proposed decisions of administrative law judges. And for that, I will call on the Vice President, Mr. Fechner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that the Board of Administration adopt the PD's proposed decision to agenda items 9A, 1 and 2, and 4 to 17 as the board's own decisions, with the modifications argued by staff to agenda items 9A, 2, 7, 10, 12, and 16. If the board agrees with these recommendations, then we will move forward.
Motion made by Mr. Fechner, seconded by Mr. Miller. Any discussion on the motion or any request to pull any other proposed decisions off of that motion? Seeing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
I move that the Board of Administration schedule agenda item 9A3 for a full board hearing.
Second.
Motion made by Fechner, seconded by Jones. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
9B.
And then 9B.
Item on 9B, I move that the Board of Administration deny the petitions for reconsideration, agenda items 9B1 and 2.
Is there a second to the motion? Motion made by Fechner, seconded by Miller. Any discussion on the motion? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes. That brings us to agenda item 10, which is the full board hearing.
Hold that till after 11.
Sorry? So we're going to, yes, we're going to hold that till
After 11.
after 11. Thank you. And then that brings us to agenda item number 11, which is the information agenda items. Enterprise Performance Reporting First Quarter Report. Ms. Hutchins.
Good morning, Madam President
Morning.
and members of the board. Sabrina Hutchins, CalPERS team member. Today I'm joined by members of our executive team to present to you the first quarter review of our Enterprise Performance Report. This report kicks off the second year reporting cycle of the current 17 through 22 strategic plan. What we want to share with you today is focused on those indicators that are either at risk or off target within this quarter. A little background before we jump in. This framework that this system works within aligns back to our foundation, which captures our mission, our vision, and our CalPERS core values, and in the simplest terms represents who we are and what we want to achieve. This includes our strategic plan goals and objectives, as well as our outcome measures, which outline our high-level operational expectations. Depicted on this slide is a high-level visual of our enterprise performance management system, which involves the development, implementation, monitoring, and reporting, as well as ad hoc refinement of performance metrics in support of our mission. The intent of this system is to reinforce CalPERS' desire to be transparent and accountable in support of our goals, objectives, and operational expectations. As this system incorporates a significant amount of data and information, we have provided the full details of our strategic and operational reports within your agenda item attachments. However, the focus of our discussion today is to highlight the strategic side of the house. Our strategic plan alignment map shows you the connection between our goals, objectives, measures, and initiatives. This is attachment A within your package. This map reflects an overlay of status indicators of red, yellow, and green. Additional details for each of the indicators can be found within your attachments C through E. As this is an iterative process, you will see where we've denoted where we are either waiting for data to come in on measures or where measures are currently under development. So our review and analysis of first quarter information identified that one of our measures refreshed with new data. This was related to our overhead operational cost and is on target, which is in the green. Of our 34 business plan initiatives, the majority are in the green. 2 are reflecting at risk, and that's as of September 30th, which we'll discuss in just a moment. Items related to our Information Security Office are presented within closed session, and we have that planned for February and September. So as our members of the executive team speak to these initiatives at risk, they'll provide the root cause as well as constraints and mitigation strategies and current status as of, again, this is as of September 30th. So with that, I will hand this over to Scott to start us off within our fund sustainability goal.
Good morning, Madam President, members of the board. Scott Tarando, CalPERS team member. And as of September 30th, the AVS-RE project, the actual evaluation system refresh, was somewhat off target. It was about 2 weeks late on a number of the objectives. But I'm happy to report that as of today, we are back on schedule. In fact, the project was actually completed in October 31st, and the system was actually launched. So even though we were behind slightly, as of the end of September, the team was able to get back on track and finish up the project on time and on schedule within the next month. So with that, I'll take any questions.
That's good news. I
Yes.
see no questions. Thank you.
All right, within our health goal.
Madam President, members of the board, the pharmacy benefit program by reference pricing by therapeutic class went yellow as of September 30th as a result of missing the 90-day launch for January 1st, 2019. With the direction you gave us yesterday, it will go green again as we redefine the new schedule for a launch in 2020. And for the record, I'm representing Leanna Bailey Crimmins, the Chief Health Director. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Donaldson. Any questions, Mr. Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yes, Ms. Donaldson, I was looking at the sheet on healthcare affordability, and you made reference to a yellow, but I don't see any yellow on that chart. I'm talking about the one in my
Which
book.
attachment? Can you articulate the page?
It's 535 of the iPad, and it's attachment C, 2 of 40.
So what we're actually looking at is attachment D in the business plan initiative area. So this is a project driving those measures. So the actual project activity was off track, which was at risk.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you. Any further questions on this item? Thanks very much for the update, Ms. Donaldson.
All right, very good. So our second quarter report will be in February of next year. Thank you so
Terrific.
much.
Thanks very much. Okay, that brings us to 11B, state and federal legislation update. Mr. Brown.
Good morning, Madam President and board members. Danny Brown, CalPERS team member. And I think consistent with Ted's comments earlier, I appreciate the opportunity to return back to the fold. And I look forward with working with you and the great team behind me on state and federal legislative issues for the benefit of our members. With that, I'll start with the state legislative update. I believe the last time you heard an update, it was just a few days before the deadline for the governor to sign and veto bills. So the written material in your board book should now show the final outcome of all of the bills that CalPERS was tracking. I did want to point out 2 bills that the governor did sign. The first one is a CalPERS sponsored bill, AB 2415, which gives the board the authority to set the salary for the chief health director and the chief operating officer. So, and this bill would go into effect on January 1st of 2019. With the signing of this bill, it means that all three of the sponsored bills that reached the governor's desk were signed. Obviously, I can't take any credit for that, but I do want to just acknowledge CalPERS team members for a job well done. The second bill is AB 1912, which was supported by the board, and this ensures that members of member agencies of a joint powers authority have to have a responsibility for the retirement liability in the event that they terminate their contract with CalPERS or cease to exist. So this is an important bill for our members to ensure that their retirement benefits are protected. Moving to the state election, I don't think it's any surprise that the Assembly maintained their supermajority and the Senate regained their supermajority after they lost it last year when Senator Newman was recalled for his gas tax vote. For those of you that are keeping score, we currently show a count of 59 Democrats in the Assembly out of 80 members, with one race that's still too close to call. Republican is currently leading that race, but each time votes come in, the lead diminishes, so it's very possible that we'll end up with 60 Democrats in the Assembly. The Senate sits at 28 Democrats and 12 Republicans. The new legislative session begins on December 3rd, and they'll come in to be sworn in and adopt rules, and they'll take another break for a month and come back in January. So in January, we'll start our outreach efforts to the new members and the pertinent committee members. Looking at the federal elections, the Democrats took control of the House while the Republicans maintained control of the Senate. As a result of this divided Congress, bipartisanship will remain the essential requirement for any bill to become law. Therefore, it will be essential for CalPERS to continue our work with key members on both sides of the aisle on solutions that are consistent with our policy goals. One example of this is our continued efforts to support several provisions contained in Senate Bill 488, the Jobs and Investor Confidence Act of 2018, or I think it's also referred to as the Jobs 3.0. Mr. Crowley talked about this in September. It passed out of the House in July on a 406-4 vote. There's many provisions in that bill that CalPERS supports. And so we have, in October, sent a letter to the chairman and ranking member of the Senate Banking Committee to encourage them to move that bill forward, keeping in the provisions that we like and making sure that they don't add provisions that we don't like. It is possible that this bill will move through the lame duck session, but if not, it's a starting point of discussion in 2019. This bill is strongly supported by Maxine Waters, who we anticipate will become the chair of the House Financial Services Committee next year. And then speaking of leadership, you probably saw in the paper yesterday that Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell and Minority Leader Chuck Schumer were reelected to their respective posts. And the House Republicans elected Congressman Kevin McCarthy as their new leader, while the Democrats won't hold their elections until after the Thanksgiving holiday. But we do expect that Nancy Pelosi will be elected Speaker. And of course, what this would mean is that both of the leadership posts will be held by Californians. Over the next few months, once the House Democratic leadership forms and we find out who all the kind of chairmanships go into place, we will provide additional information on what to expect in the next Congress. And then I thought I would just end by pointing out a bill introduced at the end of September by Congressman Brady out of Texas, H.R. 6933, the Equal Treatment of Public Servants Act of 2018, which replaces the current WEP formula, Windfall Elimination Protection formula, with a new proportional formula. This may sound familiar to some of you because, like me, a version of this bill was in front of you in 2015, H.R. 711, which the board did support. The bill has struggled to move through the House because this new formula does create winners and losers, and I think this board can appreciate the difficulty of those types of issues. I think you talked about one yesterday for quite a while. The 2018 version does make a few changes. First, for current retirees beginning in 2020, anybody that's retired who's in Social Security and subject to WEP would receive a $100 rebate. So they would not be subject to the formula, they would just get a rebate. So in a sense, all current retirees would be winners. The new proportional formula would apply for those individuals retiring beginning in 2025. Doesn't necessarily address who may win and who may lose, but it still gives kind of a transitional period to allow people to plan. And then the final thing the bill does, it would require the Commissioner of Social Security to study and test the feasibility of partnering with state and local pension systems to improve the collection of information related to non-covered pensions. So I think right now they get information on salaries that are covered by Social Security, but not necessarily all the salaries that are not covered by Social Security. So it's not likely that this bill will move through the lame duck session, but it just shows that the authors are willing to work with stakeholders and they're listening and trying to make adjustments. So we will continue to watch this bill and weigh in as necessary, particularly on the piece about working with the Social Security Administration on data. And with that, I'll stop and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. We do have some questions. Ms. Taylor.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brown. Lots of interesting new stuff happening. The WEP formula, the only question I had was that the current retirees are going to get a refund in 2020 of $100, right? And then there's that no man land period of between 2020 and 2025?
Well, I think everybody, between 2020 and 2025, all those retirees in that period will just continue to get this rebate. And so
The $100?
Right.
Okay.
And then it's not until the retirees, any new retiree beginning 2025, that new formula would apply.
Okay, so the rebate is for
It's for individuals that are in Social Security and also subject to WEP, which is the Windfall Elimination Protection, which means that they're someone that had covered and non-covered service, so they had salaries that were covered by Social Security and also salaries that maybe were not covered by Social Security, and so their Social Security is reduced based on their non-covered service or salaries. Right now, under the current law, they see a reduction.
Okay, so, and I just want to clarify then, this doesn't include employees that were always covered with Social Security?
No.
Okay. Just want to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Taylor. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Madam President. Yeah, you answered, I had the same question Ms. Taylor had, but in addition, in 2025, the $100 stop, or does it continue after?
I believe it would continue for those individuals. So there'd be like two groups. So there'd be a group that retired prior to 2025 and then a group that retired after that date. But we can put together, we can do some further analysis and put together a kind of a fact sheet or more information that can kind of spell all this stuff.
Yeah, and communication strategy too, because as you know, a lot of our members are very interested in this provision. So if you could communicate that to our members, that would also be helpful. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I see no further requests to speak. It's great to have you part of the family again, Mr. Brown. Thanks for coming back.
Great. Thank you.
Okay, that brings us to agenda item 11C, summary of board direction. Mr. Hoffner, I didn't hear anything, I don't think. Well, except to come back, I guess, on that one. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, two, you had 9A, number 3, the full board hearing. So I would call that out. And then just the item that Mr. Brown just referenced in terms of more communication strategy as well as formula. So we can come back with another legislative update at the appropriate time.
Terrific, thank you. And that brings us to public comment. We do have one member of the public who's expressed a wish to speak. Mr. Johnson, if you could please come forward, take a seat to my left. The mic is already on. And you'll identify yourself and your affiliation for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Mr. Johnson.
Good morning, Madam Chair, members of the board. My name is Neil Johnson. I represent SEIU Local 1000. I'm here today to speak about Mr. Iliopoulos. His predecessor, Joe Deere, during his term, we talked about good events, and Joe was a hero. In Ted's, 6 years as the chief investment officer, has been a hero a number of times. I remember having a brief discussion with him shortly after he took over after Mr. Deere's untimely demise, and Ted was, I think, rightfully concerned about how he would do. Joe had cast a large shadow over the organization, and Ted said, I can't do the same job. I said, Ted, your job is not to repeat Joe. You're a different person. You're going to do it your way, and you're going to be successful. And I think overall, Ted has been very successful. Currently the fund is about $360 billion, which speaks to Ted, his leadership, and the rest of the investment team in navigating through the tricky waters of the various financial markets. Sometimes we've had good years, sometimes we've had bad years. Speaking with Ms. Magason a little bit ago, said, Eric, you got 1 month. I'm sure you'll do well, but, with our overweighting of public equity, you never know what might happen in 2 days. And so you could be a hero, and you could also look not so good. Although I think Eric will do quite well. But I really do want to thank Ted for his years of service. I remember him with Mr. Angelides when Phil was treasurer back in the 1990s, and then now with PERS for the last, 17 years. And so, Ted, thank you very much for your work and your service to the organization.
Thanks very much, Mr. Johnson, for those kind words. That brings us to, we are going to now take a 15-minute break, and then we will reconvene with the full board hearing at 10:45.
We're going to reconvene the board meeting at this point. We're now going to turn to agenda item 10 and open the record for the full board hearing in the consolidated appeals of the Encina Wastewater Authority and the San Elijo Joint Powers Authority. CalPERS case numbers 2016-0356 and 2016-0354. Let us first take roll call.
Rob Fechner,
Good morning.
Priya Mathur,
Excused.
Margaret Brown,
Excused.
Matthew Saha for John Chung, Richard Costigan, Dana Hollinger, Adria Jenkins Jones, Henry Jones, David Miller, Ramon Rubicava, Bill Slayton, Teresa Taylor, and Lynn Pequin for Betty Yee.
Thank you. I want to remind all the board members that, that once we start the hearing, you all need to stay in the room. So if you, for some reason, needed to leave early, I would recommend doing so before we start the hearing. That's what happened with Ms. Mathur. She had a conflicting appointment and didn't think she could stay for the whole thing, so she has left early. The proposed decision in this case was originally considered by the board at the September 2018 board meeting. At that meeting, the board rejected the proposed decision and scheduled this matter for a full board hearing on the question of whether the value of purchase, rental, and maintenance of employer-provided uniforms should be included in the impacted members' final compensation calculations. I note for the record that all parties have received notice of this full board hearing, along with copies of the Statement of Policy and Procedures for full board hearings before the board. In addition, all parties have been informed in writing that oral argument will be limited to 10 minutes for each position, and a rebuttal will be limited to 3 minutes for each position. Would council please take a moment to introduce themselves, starting with staff council and then the members council.
Good morning, John Shipley on behalf of CalPERS.
Marguerite Seaborn, CalPERS legal team.
Thank you.
Good morning, Tracy Stender on behalf of the respondents, Encina Wastewater Authority and San Elijo Joint Powers Authority.
Thank you. Let the record also reflect that Chirag Shah, the board's independent counsel on administrative appeals, is present in this proceeding and will serve as the board's only legal advisor in this matter. Mr. Shah will also provide a brief summary of the case before we begin oral arguments. As stated previously, each position will have 10 minutes for oral argument. Mr. Shipley will first have 10 minutes to present staff's argument. After that, Ms. Stender will have 10 minutes to present argument on behalf of the two agencies. Neither side is compelled to use the full 10 minutes. However, if a party concludes argument in less than the time allotted, it will not be permitted to carry that time to another portion of this proceeding. After both sides have presented oral arguments, each side will be provided 3 minutes for rebuttal arguments in the same order as the original presentation. First, Mr. Shipley for staff, then Ms. Stender for the agencies. Here, too, a party may but does not have to use the entire time allocated for rebuttal. But if a party decides to use less time, however, there will not be another opportunity to use any time remaining during rebuttal. In other words, there are no rollover minutes in this proceeding. There is a timer in front of you, which will be set for 10 minutes for initial argument and 3 minutes for rebuttals. The timer will begin when you start to speak. Please pay close attention to the timer as you make your presentation in order to avoid going over your allotted time. When the timer light turns red, your time will have expired. After all sides' arguments and rebuttals are concluded, the board may ask questions of any of the parties to this proceeding, as well as our independent counsel. The alternatives available to the board are set forth in agenda item 10 of the board meeting materials. Any questions so far? Do all parties understand the procedure?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Now then, Mr. Shaw, please provide a brief summary of the case.
Thank you, Mr. Vice President, members of the board. Good morning to all of you. As you said, my name is Chirag Shah, and I'm the board's independent counsel on full board hearings. My summary this morning, as usual, will be very brief. I will let each counsel educate the board on the details and the merits of their respective positions. This consolidated hearing is for two separate but substantially similar disputes involving an item of special compensation under subsection C6 of section 20636 of the Public Employees Retirement Law, or PERL, and its implementing regulation at California Code of Regulations, Title II, section 571, subsection A5. Although the parties consolidated the cases into one hearing, the administrative law judge has issued two proposed decisions that are up for the board's consideration today. The respondents in both cases operate wastewater treatment facilities that process raw sewage. Section 20636 of the PERL provides in relevant part that the value of uniforms and related costs must be reported as an item of special compensation. In implementing this statutory provision and precedential case law, namely the 1981 opinion in Rose versus City of Hayward, the board has adopted as what is now known as the Uniform Allowance Regulation, which reads in its entirety as follows, and I quote, "Uniform allowance, compensation paid or the monetary value of the purchase, rental, and or maintenance of required clothing, including clothing made from specially designed protective fabrics, which is a ready substitute for personal attire the employee would otherwise have to acquire and maintain. This excludes items that are solely for personal health and safety, such as protective vests, pistols, bullets, and safety shoes," end quote. The specific issue before the board in both appeals is whether the monetary value of the purchase, rental, and maintenance of uniforms provided to certain employees by the agencies should be reported as an item of special compensation so that it may be included in the affected employee's pension calculations and the agency's contribution obligations. Both appeals arose after routine staff audits and ensuing determination letters in which CalPERS took the position that the agencies failed to properly report the value of the purchase, rental, and maintenance of uniforms provided to the impacted employees. In so doing, CalPERS permitted only some items to be classified in the health and safety exception of the Uniform Allowance Regulation. The appeals involve the items of clothing that CalPERS staff determined does not satisfy the health and safety exception because, in CalPERS' view, they are a, quote, ready substitute for personal attire. The agencies, on the other hand, argue that take the position that the uniforms are provided solely for the health and safety of their employees, their families, and the general public, and therefore are not a ready substitute for personal attire. The details of the case, the history of the litigation, and the merits of each party's position are presented in the written arguments and the administrative record before the board at Agenda Item 10. At this point, Mr. Vice President, members of the board, I conclude my brief summary this morning so that the parties may proceed with their arguments. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Let us now turn to the preliminary evidentiary issues. As all parties are aware, we are not here to relitigate factual issues or resubmit evidence into the administrative record. However, in rare circumstances, the interest of achieving a just result may require consideration of newly discovered, relevant documentary evidence which could not, with reasonable diligence, have been discovered and produced at the hearing before the administrative law judge, and which therefore is not part of the administrative record. Under no circumstance may the board accept new witness testimony or any kind of examination or cross-examination of anyone, including board members, in today's proceeding. Under the board's procedure, requests to introduce newly discovered documentary evidence must have been submitted in writing to the board secretary no later than the due date for written argument, which in this case was October 31st, 2018. In order to avoid interruptions during each party's respective time today, please let us know now if either party has any relevant newly discovered evidence which could not have been discovered and produced at the hearing that it seeks to be admitted into the administrative record today, as to which a timely written request was submitted to the board.
No.
No.
Thank you. Seeing that there are no requests to submit newly discovered evidence, let us begin oral arguments. Mr. Shipley, please present staff's argument. Please start the clock for 10 minutes when Mr. Shipley begins argument.
Good morning, Mr. Vice President and board members. CalPERS has a duty to treat all members fairly and equally, and to apply the law in a consistent manner that ensures all members receive the benefits they are legally entitled to receive. Nothing more, and critical to this case, nothing less. The issue in this case is whether CalPERS members who are provided shirts and pants to wear while at work will receive all of the benefits to which they are entitled under the law. The law provides that if a uniform substitutes for personal clothing, the monetary value of the uniform must be included in the computation of the member's retirement benefits. To date, respondents have failed to properly report uniform allowance to the detriment of their employees, which in turn deprives the retired employees from retirement benefits they are owed. These employees, these CalPERS members, are entitled to receive the pensionable benefit of the cotton and polyester shirts and pants they receive because they replace the personal clothing the employees would otherwise have to purchase. CalPERS requests the board reject the proposed decisions to ensure that these members receive all of the benefits granted to them under the law. Over 35 years ago, the Court of Appeal determined that uniform allowance must be included as a pensionable item of compensation. The Court of Appeal held that if the uniform is a ready substitute for personal attire, the value of the uniform must be considered pensionable income because it functions as a benefit for the member. The uniform is a benefit because it replaces items of clothing the member would otherwise have to purchase. The court distinguished uniform items, such as pants and shirts worn by police officers and firefighters, from ammunition and other safety items that would not be purchased but for the specific type of employment. After the court's ruling, the legislature amended the statutory scheme defining pensionable income to include uniform allowance. CalPERS adopted a uniform allowance regulation to clarify the scope of what is reportable. The current regulation ensures that all uniforms are reported if the uniform is a ready substitute for personal attire, even those uniforms made from specially designed protective fabrics. In other words, the key question in determining whether a member is entitled to the uniform allowance benefit is whether the uniform replaces personal attire, period. The employer's stated intent for providing the uniforms or how the employer characterizes the uniforms is irrelevant in reaching the answer to that question. The members at the center of this dispute are employees who work in wastewater facilities operated by respondents. Every morning, they come to work and are provided cotton or polyester shirts and pants. These uniforms are no different than clothing that could be purchased at any number of retail stores. They change out of their personal clothing, put on the uniforms, go to work, and then before leaving for the day, they change back into their personal clothing. The only remarkable thing about the uniforms is that they identify the member as one of respondents' employees. What are the uniforms? They are shirts and pants that replace the clothing the members would otherwise wear while at work. On the other hand, the members are also provided safety items, such as coveralls to wear over their uniforms when they are likely to encounter dangerous materials. The coveralls for wastewater facility employees are analogous to bulletproof vests for police officers and turnout gear worn by firefighters when actively fighting a fire. They would not be necessary but for the type of employment the individuals are engaged in. As you can see, the members are provided two very different types of clothing. The coveralls, it's an item that would not be needed but for the specific job the members perform. However, the cotton shirts and pants at issue here today replace the personal attire they would otherwise be required to wear while at work, and for that reason are reportable as pensionable compensation. Admittedly, the uniform allowance can appear counterintuitive. The uniforms, mere cotton shirts and pants, are considered a pensionable benefit to the member, but the items that actually keep the member safe are not. Perhaps the easiest way to understand why the uniforms are a type of pensionable compensation is to consider a member's income and budget. Let's assume a member's income is $50,000, and let's assume that each year the member spends 10% of his or her income on clothing, so $5,000. And let's say 50% of the clothing budget is for clothes they would buy to wear at work. So a member spends $2,500 a year on clothes. If instead a member is provided a uniform each day, they do not have to spend any money on work clothes. And this essentially amounts to an increase in their income of $2,500, the amount they otherwise would have spent on work clothes. The law requires that employers report this alternative form of compensation, this item of special compensation, as uniform allowance. And CalPERS must include the uniform allowance in the member's final compensation when determining their retirement benefits. To do otherwise would deprive the members of benefits granted to them by the legislature. And that's precisely what respondents are doing in this matter. They are not reporting to CalPERS the value of the uniforms, which in turn is reducing the members' pensionable income and their retirement benefits. Again, benefits which have been granted to the members by the legislature. In this matter, the administrative law judge, in granting respondents' appeals, made two critical errors. First, the ALJ found that the cotton shirts and pants are not a ready substitute for personal attire. There was little explanation as to how the ALJ reached this conclusion, and there is simply no support for it. What constitutes a ready substitute for personal attire? Common sense would dictate that clothes you wear instead of personal clothing are a ready substitute for personal attire. Here, the members are provided shirts and pants to wear at work. The members wear these clothes instead of wearing their own personal clothing. The uniforms are a ready substitute for personal attire. And for that reason, and that reason alone, the value of the uniforms must be reported as pensionable income. The ALJ's second and related error was misinterpreting the scope of the exclusion to the uniform allowance benefit. The narrow exclusion was intended to cover items that would not be needed but for one's job, such as ammunition, bulletproof vest, and turnouts used by firefighters. The proposed decisions found that respondents showed a reasonable connection between the uniforms and the personal health and safety of the members. However, that is not the appropriate test. The test for the exclusion under the current regulation is whether the uniforms are solely issued for the personal health and safety of the members. Here, the cotton shirts and pants replace personal attire the members would otherwise be required to purchase. Therefore, at a minimum, the uniforms serve a dual purpose. They replace personal attire and they provide a minimum amount of protection. If the term solely is to be given any meaning, cotton shirts and pants that serve the dual purpose cannot qualify under the exclusion. At the beginning, I emphasized that CalPERS must treat all members fairly and equally and apply the law consistently to ensure that all members receive the benefits to which they are entitled under the law. The proposed decisions beg the question: if mere cotton shirts and pants are not reportable under the uniform allowance, what is a reportable uniform? If the proposed decisions are adopted, the cotton shirts and pants issued to these members would not be pensionable. On the other hand, uniforms worn by firefighters and police officers are currently reported and treated as pensionable. If the proposed decisions are adopted, it would be entirely inconsistent to continue to treat firefighter and police officer uniforms as pensionable. CalPERS would be in a position where members are being treated differently and the law is not being applied consistently. The proposed decisions conflict with the purpose of the uniform allowance as stated by the Court of Appeal, the legislature, and this board. Consequently, CalPERS argues the board should decline to adopt the proposed decisions and issue a decision where all members, including the members who work for respondents and are issued uniforms, receive the uniform allowance benefits to which they are entitled. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Shipley. Please start the clock for 10 minutes for Ms. Stender to present the agency's argument.
The issue before this board is a practical one. It's whether cotton and blend shirts, pants, and coats provided to protect sanitation workers from the potentially deadly hazards they are exposed to working with raw sewage should be reported as special compensation. The proposed decisions found that these items are not reportable for two reasons. One, they're not a ready substitute for personal attire, and two, they are provided solely for health and safety. In so finding, the proposed decisions found that respondents' witnesses had the, quote, monopoly of experience and expertise and technical knowledge of the potential threats in this workplace and the most reasonable ways to address those threats and protect their employees. Whereas CalPERS staff had no expertise and no substantial evidence to support their findings. Yet staff urged this board to reject the undisputed evidence, to substitute speculation for expert judgment, and to interpret the uniform allowance regulation in a manner that is arbitrary, that is impractical, and that is plainly inconsistent with the language and intent of the regulation. That intent, as embodied by the Court of Appeal in Rose versus City of Hayward, is that benefits that merely offset the risk inherent in employment are not pensionable. That is the health and safety exception that's at issue here. I'm now going to walk you through some of the evidence that's contained in your record that is uncontradictive and compelling, and explain some of the inconsistencies in staff's argument. Respondents, directors of operations and safety manager, experts with decades of experience in the sanitation industry, testified about the hazards that employees are exposed to as a part of their employment, and testified about how their uniforms provide an essential level of protection against these risks, which include exposure to bloodborne pathogens like hepatitis, HIV, and Ebola, and contaminants like silica dust. If you look at Attachment F, Exhibit 42, page 5, you'll see this photograph. And what this depicts is the first level in the treatment process at Encina's facility. What you're looking at are the back of bar screens that rattle down into a channel of raw sewage that enters the treatment facility and then pull out solids like rags, condoms, and tampons, and then put them on this conveyor belt. You'll see that these white sort of paddles are caked in feces. Our employees work in this environment. They maintain this equipment, and they risk being splashed with sewage, raw sewage, as a part of their job duties. Next, Attachment F, Exhibit 43, page 9. This depicts the same first level of treatment, but at San Alejo's facility. Instead of a conveyor belt, they have a chute where all of these solids, like contaminated diapers and rags, fall down into. And here you'll see an employee wearing one of the uniforms in question. And what he's doing is unclogging one of these chutes, and these rags are all soaked with raw sewage. And this employee risks, as part of his job duties, being splashed. He may not know in this moment that he's being splashed. There's not a huge risk that might require a Tyvek suit, but there's enough of a risk that he should be wearing a uniform that will provide some sort of barrier between his skin and exposure. Next, Attachment F, Exhibit 43, page 3. This photograph was taken inside a digester, which is essentially a huge tank used later in the treatment process. And you'll see an employee down here on the right, and he's, or your left, or on the left. And essentially that black stuff he's standing in is concentrated raw sewage. And you'll see this employee is wearing one of the white shirts that's in question. And he risks being exposed to pathogens and other contaminants while he's performing this work. He may be wearing extra levels of protection, like waders, but he's also wearing his first level of protection, which is the pants and shirts. Finally, Attachment F, Exhibit 43, page 7. This photograph depicts an employee cleaning debris from a chute after the final stage in the treatment process at San Alejo. And you'll see he's wearing, again, the disputed uniform, and some bits of Class B biosolids have fallen onto his shirt. So again, this employee is wearing his uniform, which is acting as a first level of protection. The respondents' witnesses testified that uniforms play a vital role in keeping employees safe while they work in these hazardous conditions. Respondent's safety manager, a chemical engineer with over 28 years of experience with Cal-OSHA compliance, stated that employee shirts, pants, and coats, though made of mere cotton, still act as an effective barrier between an employee's skin and potential contaminants. By providing these uniforms, respondents are providing their employees with a first level of protection against exposure. And you can see this first level of protection at work looking at these photos. Employees working in the bar screens may be splashed and not know it, but thankfully, respondents provide them with these uniforms that they then change out of at the end of the day, shower, leave at the facility to be professionally laundered. Then employees change into their regular attire to go home for the day. Employees are not allowed to wear these uniforms to and from work. They have to wear their regular attire to and from work. The proposed decisions found that this evidence overwhelmingly proves that uniforms are not reportable because they're not a ready substitute for personal attire. Common sense dictates that if something can't be worn as personal attire, it's not personal attire. But even if it was personal attire, these uniforms are still not reportable because they are provided solely for employee health and safety. That's the only reason respondents provide these uniforms to its employees, to offset the risks that are inherent in their employment. CalPERS staff don't deny that uniforms provide some safety function. Instead, they speculate about how effective that protection is if sometimes other levels of protection are needed. This speculation comes without any qualification or expertise in being able to assess the hazards present in these facilities or the most reasonable methods to protect employees from those hazards. Staff also makes a series of random distinctions, which if adopted, would lead to absurd and inconsistent results. For example, staff argues these, quote, not remarkable uniforms are too common. They're made of cotton. You can buy them at a store. However, the rulemaking file clearly states that whether or not a uniform is made of a special fabric is irrelevant. So the fact that these are not remarkable and made of cotton is irrelevant. CalPERS circulars have provided that coveralls and orange shirts are not reportable because they're provided solely for employee health and safety. The public agency reviews that CalPERS conducts find that other agencies' orange shirts, which are a substitute for a shirt someone might otherwise wear, are not reportable. The regulation itself says that safety shoes are provided solely for health and safety and are not reportable, even though they substitute for shoes that an employee might otherwise wear. There's no reason that sanitation worker shirts, pants, and coats should be treated any differently than a mechanic's overalls or a road worker's orange shirt, which CalPERS has repeatedly found are exempt. These items are commonly available. They replace regular attire that employees would otherwise wear. None of these distinctions change the fact that respondents provide uniforms to their employees solely for health and safety and for no other reason. If the board accepts staff arguments, it will be going against its own advice and it will be treating its members inconsistently. We and other sanitation agencies that operate wastewater treatment plants urge this board to adopt the proposed decisions and set a practical common sense standard. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Tender. Mr. Shipley, would you like to offer a rebuttal? Please start the clock for 3 minutes for staff's rebuttal. Microphone, sir. Thank you.
The critical question in this matter is whether the shirts and pants provided to respondents' employees are a ready substitute for personal attire. Whether Cal-OSHA requires them to provide uniforms, whether Cal-OSHA requires them to be laundered in a certain way is not important to this case. This case is about what is pensionable, what qualifies as a pensionable item of compensation under the PERL. And the regulation says if it's a ready substitute for personal attire, it's a pensionable item of compensation. These are shirts, these are pants, these are what they wear instead of wearing their own personal clothing. And as I said, for that reason and that reason alone, the items must be considered an item of special compensation and pensionable. The regulation does require that an item issued solely for personal protection of the employee be excluded. However, these are the shirts and pants are not items that qualify under that exclusion. As the Court of Appeal indicated in the Rose decision, items that would qualify would be ammunition, it would be the asbestos, the full turnout coats and uniforms that firefighters wear while actively fighting a fire. Those are the type of items that are excluded under the regulation. Here, we're talking about cotton shirts, polyester shirts. They're even listed as polo shirts and pants. These are not something that these are something that simply are a ready substitute for personal attire. They're not something that equates to what should be excluded under the regulation. In addition, the regulation requires that they be solely issued for personal health and safety. And as the respondents have indicated, there's a variety of reasons why these uniforms are issued. But the critical question is, are they solely issued for personal health and safety? And the answer to that question is no. They're issued for a variety of reasons, but that in itself excludes them from being something that should fall within that narrow exclusion that was first provided by the Court of Appeal in the Rose decision and since adopted by this board in the Uniform Allowance Regulation. This case is really about, do shirts and pants, are they a ready substitute for personal attire? They might not be the same exact clothes that the people wear when they come to work, and they might not be the same exact clothes when they leave to go home from work. But the question is, are they personal attire when they are at work? And the question to that answer is undoubtedly yes. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stender, would you like to offer rebuttal?
Yes, please.
Please set the clock for 3 minutes for agency's rebuttal.
There's some very concerning circular logic being offered to this board. The regulation itself, which you were quoted at the beginning, provides that uniforms that are a ready substitute for personal attire are not reportable, except for items provided solely for health and safety. The argument that's being made right now is these uniforms aren't provided solely for health and safety because they're a ready substitute for personal attire. That's circular. The issue is, even if something is a ready substitute for personal attire, if it's provided for health and safety, then it's still exempt. That's how exceptions work. So here, even if you believe that these shirts and pants are a ready substitute for personal attire, even though employees can't wear them home without endangering the safety of their family, or wear them to the grocery store without endangering the safety of the people there, they're still exempt because they are provided solely for health and safety. There's a statement made that these uniforms are provided for a variety of reasons. There's no evidence in the record that these uniforms are provided for any reason but to protect employees' health and safety, to provide that first level of protection, as the respondent's safety manager testified to. And as the court held in Rose v. City of Hayward, if a uniform item is provided merely to offset a risk in employment, it's not pensionable. Here, these pants and shirts and coats are provided only to offset the risk of exposure inherent in working in and around raw sewage. There's no risk that finding that these shirts and pants are exempt will lead to all shirts and pants being exempt. All workplaces are different. The employees who work in these sanitation facilities face different and constant hazards than a firefighter might face while he's wearing a shirt, or that a police officer might face. So this is really, should be based on the facts before this board, which are this specific workplace, which is gated, closed off from the public because of the dangers, and which presents a constant risk of exposure to potentially deadly contaminants. The uniforms these people are being provided are just provided to help protect them from those risks. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So now we'll open up to questions from board members. Are there board members that have questions? Ms. Taylor?
Yes, thank you, Mr. President. And I'm sorry, I didn't catch her name.
That's okay. It's Tracy Stender.
Tracy Stender. Okay, Ms. Stender, you had mentioned earlier in your argument about Tyvek suits. Do you provide those in addition to these?
Correct. Those are available for certain types of work.
So the work that you have pictures of here in our evidence isn't part of that work?
I can show you an example of when an employee might wear a Tyvek suit. And if you look at this photo, that channel of raw sewage I was talking about, sometimes employees have to literally get into that channel. They'd put on a Tyvek suit for that.
And waiters?
Correct.
And waiters, okay. So I think I'm a little lost as how you can call, because I'm looking at this guy and it's Joint Exhibit 43, and I don't know which page it is. Let me see, maybe it starts at the beginning. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He's in a polo shirt and his pants. I can't tell if he's got waders on. He might. He's filthy. So how is that protective? I'm a little confused as to how is that protective? He's uncovered from here down. His arms are filthy. He has gloves on. So how does this shirt serve as a protective garment?
So there's basically levels of risk, and that's what the respondent safety manager testified to is, what they're handling at this point may be something from much later in the treatment process that presents little to no risk. But still, they want to have something available to these employees that they can change out of, have laundered at the facility, not take home just in case there's some exposure. And that also being said, employees do have some amount of discretion when they're selecting what uniform items to put on. The agencies issue guidelines, and they have available a spectrum of personal protective equipment. So looking at this particular photo, I'm not positive what these employees are working with, so it may be something low hazard. But an hour later, they might go into the headworks, which is that first facility that you see, and have to clean something off the bar screens, in which case there's a heightened risk of hazard.
But I'm still confused as to how any of these shirts, because they're just cotton shirts, provide any measure than any other shirt that I would wear to work of protection, because it's just a cotton shirt. So if it can provide, if I can take a shirt from home and wear it to work to do the same thing, then aren't we invalidating your argument?
Well, you couldn't necessarily, because, for example, some employees work around flash hazards. So if you brought a shirt home, or you brought a shirt in from home and it had some polyester blend and you were about to work in a flash hazard area, there would be risk of, there's some fire risk and burn risk to you. The other issue is you would then have to leave your personal shirt at work for us to professionally launder, because you can't bring these items home and wash them or have them around a family member who's immune suppressed or something like that.
So if this is also another concern of mine, if this is a concern of bringing these uniforms home, I have two questions. One is, why wouldn't a Tyvek suit be worn all the time? And number two, are these contractually obligated uniform requirements by the employee groups?
To address your first question, the Tyvek suit is recommended based on the level of hazard. So again, they're working around heavy machinery and equipment. A Tyvek suit may not be appropriate around some of that equipment because it's baggy and it may create additional hazards. So the chemical engineer who makes these assessments has determined cotton still provides some level of some barrier between the skin and the contaminant, and that can be sufficient for a lot of the lower level hazards. When the hazard increases and it's appropriate based on what conditions the employee's working with, they may then opt for a Tyvek suit. The second question, the employees here are unrepresented. The unions at these facilities were decertified. So I'm not aware of like a contractual obligation to wear the uniforms, but in their employee handbooks, it does say that you are required to wear these uniforms and employees are subject to discipline if they don't wear the uniforms.
Okay, and the requirement that you guys also, you just mentioned was the shirts and the pants have to be 100% cotton?
It depends on the employee, but generally, most of the shirts and pants are 100% cotton.
Why does it depend on the employee?
If you're working around my understanding is if you're working around a flash risk or flash hazard where there's potential for fire, polyester can burn and melt, so they don't want employees wearing that. I think most of the uniforms have switched to cotton, if not all, 100% cotton.
Okay, so then I can still buy 100% cotton clothing and bring it into work and provide the same kind of protection that you are stating is the sole purpose of these clothing. So that's where I think I'm having a problem with this, but I think you answered all the questions I had. I'll let someone else.
Thank you. Mr. Miller.
Yeah, I just want to see that I understand this. And in the workplace, when there are hazards, and I'm a professional scientist. I've been doing field science work on and off for over 30 years. And we have folks in uniform, Fish and Wildlife, other places, Department of Toxics, our people are in the field all the time, hazardous substances, hazardous materials, law enforcement. All these folks on a daily basis are potentially exposed to infectious agents. Our folks deal with hantavirus out in the field. Our law enforcement partners, certainly in the correctional and out in the streets, deal with potential exposures to bloodborne pathogens, bodily fluids, you name it. And for all of us, if I do that work and I'm wearing this suit, it provides me some level of protection, just as a correctional officer's uniform or a paramedics or a Department of Toxics person cleaning up or investigating sites, industrial sites. Our folks are out in the field every day in uniforms doing work with wildlife, with other natural hazards, and their uniforms do provide them some level of protection. But if I, as a responsible for a team in the field, in consultation with an industrial hygienist, believe that there is any significant risk for them of exposure to infectious agents, bloodborne pathogens, ticks, hantavirus, hazardous materials, hazardous substances, airborne, I'm going to provide them, and without getting into too much technical detail, level D, level C, level B, personal protection. And what you're describing scares the heck out of me, because if these people really are relying on a cotton shirt as their primary and the sole purpose of that, rather than having them being able to, be out there without additional protection, it doesn't sound sensible to me. I think any uniform provides you some basic level of protection, whether it's from the hazards of sunshine or snake bite or whatever. And I think, so this would say to me that anyone who is required to wear any kind of clothing on the job. It just doesn't seem to make sense to me, versus things like having to wear a safety boot or having to wear a personal firearm or having to wear a safety vest for a specific job where there's specific risk. So I'm having a hard time understanding how you would apply that to all of these employees who have to wear a uniform, which incidentally does provide them some minimal level of protection, but which is a ready substitute for the clothing that they could and perhaps would be wearing on the street.
I appreciate the question, and I think the key is what are we focusing on? And I think what the regulation requires us to focus on and what the Court of Appeal was focused on is what are the specific risks that the employee is facing. I can't speak to how prevalent or common the risks, health and safety risks are for employees in other workplaces. This specific workplace necessarily involves exposure to raw sewage. That's what these men do all day. So it's not an offhand risk. It's not a secondary risk. It's just something that they are dealing with necessarily as part of their employment every day. The issue about, well, this isn't very technical material. It's not at a higher level of protective material, doesn't change the fact that it does provide a level of protection for the specific risks and hazard faced by these specific employees. And I want to point again to the orange shirts that CalPERS has repeatedly found are exempt for health and safety reasons. It's just an orange shirt. There's nothing special about it. But the fact that you can buy an orange shirt at Walmart doesn't change the fact that when that employee performing those specific job duties in a road or whatever is now having this extra layer of protection or this health and safety benefit just because the shirt's orange. So the fact that these uniforms aren't highly technical doesn't matter, and the rulemaking file supports that the type of fabric that the uniform is made of is irrelevant. What's relevant is what are the risks being faced by these employees, and what does the evidence in the record show? It shows that highly qualified individuals with significant amount of experience working around these hazards have determined that cotton shirts and pants are generally sufficient to provide a first level of protection.
Mr. Vice President, may I just respectfully object to Ms. Stender's testimony regarding orange shirts? It's not in the evidence. She's providing her own testimony that isn't part of the record. The record is very limited as to what, especially the admitted evidence in the record is very limited as to what those orange shirts actually were. So I think it's inappropriate for her to testify about the orange shirts that is testimony that's not part of the record before the board.
I'd refer council and the board to Attachment F, Exhibit 37, page 15. And in it is a CalPERS circular where CalPERS was specific. Here, I can read it just to set the record.
Which exhibit? Which exhibit?
So this is a circular from
Which exhibit?
January 11th, 1985. It starts on page 9. And on page 15, there's a question. With respect to safety equipment, would safety equipment include the coveralls we provide to mechanics and maintenance workers to protect them from paint, hot tar, chemicals, oil, and grease, and the orange shirts we provide to employees working in public streets? Answer, yes. Safety equipment would include the coveralls and orange shirts.
Mr. Slayton?
Yes, so following up the last question, it seems to come down to the word solely, in my estimation, as I look at this case. So are there a set of procedures for the employees for these agencies that say, that declare the range of protective assets?
It's not so much a set of procedures, but they have adopted guidelines and designations of personal protective equipment that is available. And it's my understanding that the cotton shirts and pants are designated as a type of personal protective equipment, in addition to waders, Tyvek suits, goggles, lab coats for those types of employees.
Is there evidence in the record, and I didn't see it, where it's defined as protective clothing?
Give me 1 second to look.
I think that while you're looking for that, I think the issue of whether it's cotton or whether it's some other higher level of protection, I would suggest is an agency determination, not CalPERS looking over the transom at what the proper level, that's not our business. So I think that it's incumbent upon the agency to have defined what is protection, especially if the case is trying to hang on the issue of solely for that purpose. For instance, I could go out and buy steel-toed boots. I could buy safety boots. They're available in the marketplace. I could wear them anywhere I want to go personally. So, but the question is it being provided solely for the purpose of safety? I also think the issue of taking clothing home is a safety issue. And I presume, and maybe you can confirm this, that in fact in the employee procedures, it is defined as you have to leave them here, and the reason being that it's a safety issue rather than a convenience issue.
Correct. That's absolutely correct. And I think the evidence in the record that will support this is in Attachment F, Exhibits 30 through 33. You'll find the human resources and employee handbooks for the various agencies, and you'll also find their bloodborne pathogen exposure control plans. These documents combined set forth the requirements that employees wear the uniforms, the requirements that the uniforms be left on site to be professionally laundered and not taken home, and that employees will be disciplined for violating that, and that these uniforms...
Are we referring to page 480 in the, I think it's 480, 9.21 dress and grooming standards? Is that where you are?
Correct.
Okay, it's 480 on the iPad. And the...
That's Exhibit 32.
Yeah, and
It says on 481 that they may not be removed from the premises.
Okay, so back to my first question. You were looking for the reference.
So in the bloodborne pathogen exposure control plans, which I'm trying to get the page number for you, starts with Exhibit 32.
So it does, I see the 3.0 on 482. This is Exhibit 32. EWA management is responsible for the development and implementation of this policy and procedure to control exposure to pathogens. Is that what you're referring to?
Yeah, essentially it covers methods of compliance. For me, it's page 2 of 12, starting, the bait stamp number is EWA 61. It discusses personal protective equipment, and it says includes, it doesn't mention the shirts and pants here, but if you look down at the next page, 62, letter F at the bottom, employees shall use the locker room facilities for changing clothes and footwear before going home.
So, and C, all employees with potential occupational exposure to bloodborne pathogens are required to wear EWA provided uniforms.
Correct. Thank you.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Hollinger.
Yes. I view this as really the purpose of changing into the uniforms as actually the health and safety here is them being able to control the contamination that might be possible if these clothes were taken home. They're thrown in a laundry basket. So, and so I see that as a health and safety factor of containing that. And I think that when I look at the compliance, it's strict adherence to this. You can be terminated. So I think it actually protects society and families that the pathogens that would come from bringing this particular clothing home. So I do see it as health and safety.
Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President. I would like to get information about the employee who traditionally comes to work with the uniforms that they're provided. During the course of their duties and work, are there situations that require them to go and get protective clothing and wear over those existing clothing, or to change and wear the protective clothing alone?
There are situations where an employee may go and add additional protective clothing. They're always wearing their base uniform, but like the example I gave of an employee who needs to wade down into that channel of sewage, they'll go and they'll put on additional protective clothing like a Tyvek suit and waders. And there could be situations where someone is sprayed and saturated, in which case they're immediately going to go shower and change out of their uniform and into a new uniform. But they're always wearing that first level of protection.
So that does suggest then that there's a difference in the protective uniform versus the traditional clothing that's provided.
There's definitely a difference in levels of protection provided, but it doesn't change the fact that that uniform, the shirts and pants, is providing a first level of protection.
Ms. Taylor?
I'm just following on Ms. Hollinger and Mr. Slayton's questions about your calling these uniforms for health and safety. And I think you in the beginning had talked about bloodborne pathogens, human bodily fluids. So my question to you is, in a hospital, there's uniforms worn as well, but they for bloodborne pathogens, infectious, there's specific ways to dispose of that. I'm not clear on how this clothing protects an employee after coming in contact with a bloodborne pathogen, especially some of these shirts that I'm looking at. I can see maybe the long sleeve shirts, but I'm not sure. I'm not sure that I'm seeing anywhere in this evidence that you guys have a specific level of danger and what kind of clothing is worn for each specific event. And so I'm a little confused about that as well. If some of this clothing is worn to prevent contact with I'm looking at the CDC recommendations here for HIV, HBV, HCV, bloodborne pathogens. I don't see how, if it soaks through those cotton shirts, it's still going to touch your skin. So
yeah, and that's again the situation I described where someone may be inadvertently splashed. It's not soaking through, but there's some contamination on that uniform, and it's provided a barrier between that employee's skin and that splash. It's still providing a barrier and a level of protection. If an employee's soaked, they're going to go change and they're going to shower. Or if they think there's a risk of soaking, they might put on an extra level of protection. But that first level of protection is protecting the employee from small exposure. It's a conservative measure. And then it's also protecting people at large because, again, some of these pathogens can live for days on a surface. So if that employee is wearing this to the supermarket or wearing it home, then it's creating this additional health and safety risk.
So I'm really concerned then that you don't provide additional clothing they must wear all of the time. Because if this is something that these guys in their polo shirts are getting on their skin and can sit on their skin for weeks at a time, that seems tremendously unsafe for your employees to begin with. So I'm not clear on how these cotton shirts and pants provide enough safety that you could claim these are health and safety only shirts.
Well, as I mentioned, all employees are required to shower before they leave. So I agree. Sometimes I look at these pictures and you'll see they've rolled up their sleeves. In San Diego, it's hot. Maybe that's why. But they're still going to wash before they leave. So they're still washing their skin, and they're leaving that uniform that potentially still has contaminants on it at the workplace. So the risk, from my understanding, is neutralized.
Just if you have commentary on this. Thank you.
I did have a little bit. First of all, to kind of address, I think, your question, the question was asked of one of the witnesses, would long sleeve shirts protect an individual from bloodborne pathogens? And the answer was, if they get soaked through, no. I mean, that's why we have them shower. So clearly these shirts, and especially if they're wearing short sleeve shirts, they're not going to provide protection against bloodborne pathogens. And so I think common sense would hopefully dictate that if they are actually in a hazardous situation, that they would change into a Tyvek suit, which of course is something that CalPERS has determined should not be reported because it's not a ready substitute for personal attire. The other thing I would just briefly like to address is there is a public safety component to not having the uniforms taken home, but I think we have to focus again on what the language of the regulation is. And the regulation provides that they are solely for personal health and safety. And so that's where the case law came to, is this solely for the personal health and safety of the individual? If it's a public health and safety, of course, it benefits everybody. It benefits the employer because they're reducing their liability by not having these dangerous. But here, and I'm not here to judge whether they're doing what they're doing correctly or not. I'm just here to say, what does the law say? What does the PEARL say? And the PEARL says if it's a substitute for personal attire, it's reported. And to be an exclusion, it has to be solely for personal health and safety. So when you add all these other components, a public health component, to identify them as an employee, that's not for personal health and safety, and so it doesn't qualify under the exclusion.
And I just had one other quick question, and this was discovered through an audit. It wasn't like somebody tried to retire and wanted that. It was discovered through an audit that CalPERS performed, correct?
That's correct. The CalPERS audit office went down, collected evidence to ensure were they making the correct determination. The evidence showed that these were cotton shirts and pants, that these were polo shirts, and deemed that these were a substitute for personal attire because they wear them at the work instead of wearing their personal clothing.
And I will say that it is generally not CalPERS practice to find things to pay extra for. So I think that's an interesting way that this came about. So I just was...
Well, I would just respectfully say it's our practice to try to apply the law correctly and consistently to all members. And if that, in this case, indicates that the members are entitled to greater retirement benefits, that's what the law requires.
Right. Thank you.
Mr. Slayton.
So I want to pick up on the point that you just made, the council just made, CalPERS council, on this issue of the personal safety. So if the uniforms, it would be impractical, I presume, for people to take their personal clothing and leave it there and have it be laundered. I mean, that creates all sorts of potential problems for an employer as well as an employee. So that's kind of impractical if you're going to need to have control on the clothing reaching outside the facility, getting outside the facility. I could make an argument that personal safety includes being exposed to that clothing outside the workplace. From what I gather, and counsel for the agencies can maybe confirm this, that the requirement, and I read it, you're required to shower. You're required to leave the clothing there. It seems to me that one could make an argument that that is for your own personal safety, so that you don't then put your clothing that was exposed to whatever is exposed to, put it in a bag or a gym bag and take it home with you. Now that I would say that there's an ancillary benefit of public health there, but it doesn't exclude personal health of not touching that clothing after you, when you change clothes, and then you're required by the regulation to shower. So what am I guess, counsel for CalPERS, what am I missing here if the argument could be made, forget the issue of whether things could go through cotton or not go through cotton. It's clear that things can get on the clothing. I don't think anybody's arguing that point. So the question is, could it be construed that personal safety, by leaving it there and being required to leave it there, fits that personal safety issue?
I would say in addressing that, I think the safety is more from the way the clothing is handled, whether it's laundered. And so the actual item is not what is providing safety to the employees. It's the
procedure.
Huh?
It's the procedure.
It's the procedure. And so, yes, the procedure does provide some additional, but what we're looking at is the actual item of clothing. It's the item of clothing that's being provided free of charge to the member, which is a benefit. And so the case in Rose v. City of Hayward, it did discuss that, of course, the employer is going to gain some ancillary benefits from providing uniforms to their employees. But the focus, because this is a question of what retirement benefits the members get, must be on what advantage is provided to the member. And in this case, the member's advantage is they don't have to buy any work clothes. And that's a benefit to them. They save money because they no longer have to purchase any clothes for work.
Okay, but to take that argument one step further, let's suppose that what we were talking about was hazmat suits, that when they arrive at work, they have to put on a hazmat suit. So if they have to put on a hazmat suit, that would not be a benefit that would be pensionable, because it falls under it's solely for safety.
But I don't believe anybody would consider a full hazmat suit as a ready substitute for personal attire.
But it could fall under I grant you that, but it could also fall under the exception, could it not?
I would say that a hazmat suit would fall under the exception, but we would never get to the question of whether it's pensionable or not, because it's not a ready substitute for personal attire.
Right, so there's a two-part test. You got the first general language, and then you've got the exception. If you don't fall into the general wording, i.e. it's not a good substitute, you never get to the exception. Is that correct?
I believe that would be correct.
Okay.
If it's not a ready substitute, then it's never going to be.
So we fall into the ready substitute. Now the question is, does the exemption apply? And I think the argument is whether this is solely for safety or not solely for safety. That seems to be the argument, and I guess we're going to decide, this board's going to have to make that decision. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Rubalcava.
Thank you. I think it is a good thing that the agency does provide and launder uniforms. And I note that in Joint Exhibit 12, which is the salary resolution for the non-represented unit, or I guess all of them represented, the last attachment to that is the listing of benefits. It says benefits. That's what it's called, benefit description. Starts with medical insurance. And at the very end, it says uniforms provided and laundered by EWA as required. Then the last entry is safety boots, $250 per year per group member. So clearly, safe boots are saying, the agency provides it, which is a good thing. It defines it as safety. Uniforms are just listed as uniforms. If it is seen as a key part of the first level of protection, why isn't it listed as saying uniforms for safety or required for safety? Why is it just so generic if it's so important to the agency as a first level of protection?
I'd imagine it's just for brevity's sake, because elsewhere in the bloodborne pathogen exposure control plans and in the human resources policy manual, it extensively discusses how uniforms provide a safety function. And I think it's also important to point out that safety boots listed as a benefit here are exempt for health and safety reasons. So just because something's listed as a benefit here doesn't mean that it's not provided solely for health and safety and that it's not exempt. Presumably, employees have to wear shoes. So we are essentially giving you money to buy shoes that you would otherwise have to buy. So it doesn't matter that we're also paying for a uniform for a shirt that you might otherwise have to buy. Just like it doesn't matter that some road workers get an orange shirt to replace a shirt they might otherwise have to buy. The reg talks about why is the uniform provided. It says except for items provided solely for health and safety. So the analysis should look at what is the intent of this agency in providing this uniform. The only reason we're providing these uniforms is for health and safety. Thereby, they're exempt.
Anything else from Mr. Rubalcaba?
No, thank you.
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I have two kind of areas. One, just following up on that, is when it comes to something like safety boots, safety shoes, safety footwear, there are very specific specs that they have to meet for specific crush loads, et cetera. There are ANSI spec stuff. Same thing with reflective clothing, high-vis stuff. They're not really a substitute for what you wear around on the street. They're specific, they're different, they're expensive, and they're clearly a safety article, whether it be a reflective vest or different levels of crush-proof footwear. And so one of the things that I keep trying to resolve in my mind, and this may be more the question part for CalPERS, is we have folks that I deal with all the time who are in the field. Some of them are uniformed folks. Some of them aren't, doing the same kind of work. In my department, we routinely have people like me in the field that have to put on personal protective equipment, Tyvek, respiratory protection, eye protection, and pretty regularly, anyone who's done that kind of work knows that does not keep you from getting contaminated. And your personal clothing or your uniform gets contaminated, and sometimes you have to go home in something you brought with you as a spare, or that the department, may have some sweats there that you can put on because you have to leave your personal Levi's behind, or your uniform stuff has to stay and go with the either decontamination or destruction if it's hazardous waste or biological agents. And so it seems that for CalPERS, this would imply, if we accepted this view, that virtually everybody who wears any kind of uniform, whether they're in a bakery or a laboratory, or whether if they're not in a laboratory, maybe they should, that would be all out the window, and it would all now, that wouldn't be a benefit, uniforms anymore. So it seems like that has much more far-reaching ramifications that are really contrary to what we're trying to accomplish.
Just to briefly address that, I would agree. I think if you start to take truly what are non-safety items, cotton shirts, cotton pants, and you say, okay, those now qualify under a narrow safety exclusion, then you've essentially allowed the exclusion to swallow the rule. Nothing is going to be able to qualify as an item that's a ready substitute for personal attire, because everything, let's face it, all clothes, I think there was a comment, they provide protection from the sun, they provide protection from different ingredients, different materials, so everything becomes protection, and therefore the exception swallows the rule, and the regulation shouldn't be interpreted in a manner in which basically the uniform allowance regulation is rendered meaningless.
All right, seeing no other requests to speak, the board will now go into closed session. Don't parties stay close. We probably be back shortly, but the board will move into the back room along with its independent counsel. Board meeting back to order. Mr. Jones.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. President, Vice President. I move that the board reject the proposed decisions of the administrative law judge, deny the appeals, and issue the board's own final decisions in both cases as argued by staff.
Second.
All right, it was moved and seconded. We have a motion before us. Please turn on the voting machines. Let's vote electronically. Motion carries. Thank you very much. We thank you all for your attendance today and for presenting to us. We will now move on to our board closed session. So we're going to adjourn the open session, and we'll move into closed session as soon as we can clear the room. So thank you very much. We'll see the rest of you next month.
Thank you.
The meeting is adjourned.